had this moment where I was like, wait a second, this tool is, its output is code and markdown files, but it's really kind of, it's a system generator. Code happens to be the language that one of the languages it speaks, markdown is the other, besides obviously, human languages. What other systems could I build that aren't necessarily software? And I've always had this dream of having one box that I can open up and drop anything I want into it. A link, a quote, a random thought that pops into my head. Like I have this very, almost for 20 years, I've been doing this habit where I take a note of that random thought that pops into your head. I just jot it down just to get it out of my head. And then once a month, I review all of those notes and look for patterns. And it's like part of my way of, seeing what are the things that pop into my head over and over. Maybe that's a clue or a priority or something like that. So I always wanted a box where I instead of having to figure out what app to put it in, or with links, like bookmarking has never worked for me. And I'm convinced it doesn't work for most people because it's a junk drawer, right? Stuff goes in. And even if you are like a diligent metadata person, good luck finding what you're looking for again.
Yeah.
And then same thing with like personal knowledge management tools, Notion, junk drawer, project management tools, junk drawer, to-do lists, junk, like they're all this, like it requires me to do a lot of thinking just to put a thing in. And also I have to remember where it is, all these other things. I'm like, that's what software should do, right?
Right.
And so my very first version was me figuring out how I could just drop a link into Claude Code with no other instructions, and it would know what to do.
Welcome to PhillyCocoa presents Side Project Spotlight, episode 105. This is a developer's journey into making cool stuff. I'm Kotaro.
I'm Steve.
And I'm Aaron.
And we are PhillyCocoa, a Philadelphia-based Cocoa Heads community focused on Apple development that primarily, but not exclusively, means iOS, Mac, tvOS, watchOS, and visionOS development. PhillyCocoa's true desire is to take you higher on your own developer journey. Whew. All right. So today we have a special guest. I've known this person for quite a long time. He is a co-founder at a Philadelphia-based co-working community called Indie Hall. I've known Indie Hall, I don't want to say 2 decades ago, but
unfortunately, that's the correct answer.
I've seen our demographic breakdown in the podcast. We're old and we speak to olds.
Yeah. So I was there. PhillyCocoa actually, I believe PhillyCocoa Heads was actually founded in the basement of the original Indie Hall office, which was I don't know if office is a good way to describe it, but basically on like third between Market and Arch. But anyway, that's beside the point. The value of which we've always had, we've sort of evolved with Indie Hall as sort of the explosion of the app economy, and then eventually moving back for a period of time, and then hopefully we, at some point have opportunities to do more presentations at Indie Hall. Without further ado, Alex Hillman, thank you for joining us today.
Thanks for having me, guys.
Cool.
Yeah, welcome.
So
I've wanted to have Alex on for a while.
Well, I'll add, Kotaro, so there's a couple of pieces to the story that I think are really interesting. One is Cocoa Heads was effectively founded by Indie Hall members, and I think it was before it was even Cocoa Heads. It was or PhillyCocoa. It was like a couple of indie Mac developer workshops that we hosted. And the other part is I think PhillyCocoa can claim that you were the first meetup that we ever hosted. All the way back in 2007. So like in the arc of Philly tech and creative meetups, PhillyCocoa we're part of each other's origin story.
Wow.
Which is cool. So yeah, this is special for me too.
Awesome. It's good to know that. I didn't even know that part.
Yeah.
Yeah, when did I joined like I think
because
like
this was
10 years
close
ago
to
now.
like
This was-
2000. It must have been 2006, 2007 then.
I was going to say,
somewhere
the
in that
beginning would have
range.
been 2007. Like, I really think it was in
Yeah.
the fall after we opened the first spot. And Stephen, I think, we probably might have been like after that initial spot, we moved into the spot that was on 3rd Street. I'm pretty sure that would have been like probably 2009, 10-ish era.
I went down to PhillyCocoa when the first conference was, the Coca Love conference.
Love.
Yeah. Where with Curtis and the crew had put together.
Yeah.
Culture was there. That's where I met him.
That's good.
And
Yeah.
I still have the little glass, what are you, portraits that you made?
Yeah, with
profile pics?
the illustrated. That was so cool. So cool.
Yeah. That was crazy fun. Pain in
So
the
that
butt to
like-
draw.
That's because
Like
you
10
drew
years
those
ago,
Koto,
right?
didn't you?
Yeah. The first version
Yeah.
I drew.
Yeah.
Usually that's just tend to be my MO of like, if I start something, I'll be the first one to do it, and then eventually somebody with a little more time and skill and can do the next versions. But that was a lot of fun. Yeah, that was all done. All the custom portraits for each participant that we had to like stealth find and do. That would be their badge as they came in. Was kind of a nice treat for them.
I just realized we're really bad at doing YouTube intros because we still haven't explained why Alex is here.
It's okay. Yeah.
That is our
This
MO.
is the magic
That
of
is our
editing,
MO.
right?
I know we're gonna have to edit this. We're not used to editing either. But besides Alex having this relationship with PhillyCocoa heads, we wanted to bring him on because in the current era of the AI, just insert your own scare quotes whenever I say the word AI because I hate the terminology in this space so much. I don't know how you feel about it, Alex, but I hate it so much. The anthropomorphizing.
Pretty sure I'm with you.
Yeah. So the AI space, we've seen a lot of big kind of hype and a lot of changes, even just since December. I mean, that's like when I actually have just in the last few weeks found it useful in my day job. But the thing that's really been making waves lately, coincidentally, is like the OpenClaw thing, the AI bot. But before that even happened, I saw over the holiday break, I saw Alex. I don't know how I first saw what you were working on, but you were working on your own personal assistant. And I watched your YouTube videos. You had 2 really long ones, like a live stream and your initial introduction. And I thought this is like one of the coolest things that I've ever seen people do. And I think you should just explain like what is this thing that you built that we wanted to talk about today? Because it's like I've been trying to explain to people, and it's hard.
It is a weird thing to explain, and like I played with a lot of language around it. Back in October, I started down the path of creating like an executive assistant for myself using Claude code. I think that's the shortest answer that I can give you. It is kind of spiraled. I don't want to say out of control because it's actually spiraled into control in some really interesting ways. But it like what it has turned into is in so many ways not at all what I set out to build. And we can talk about that journey some more. But I think the interesting thing here is I've started using AI developer tool it was around this time last year. I picked up Cursor for the first time. And I used it initially to build some internal tools for Indie Hall. And it was sort of a light bulb moment that, my background is in software development. I was never a particularly good programmer. I was a front-end developer. I was very good at HTML, CSS, and JavaScript in an era where cross-browser compatibility was actually a pain. And so my specialization was that. I was like, I was like a master plumber for getting your stuff to work in all browsers. But when it came to actual like programming and engineering, that was always somebody else. And the good news is like I was always around, including within the Indie Hall community, some really talented engineers. And I learned a lot by working alongside those folks and picked up all of the like architecture and systems design skills, which is like my actual background. But then as Indie Hall took off and I got more into business and things like that, my programming skills such that they were at your feet even worse. And I could build a website. I learned Tailwind along the way so that I could like make landing pages for my stuff. But that was really kind of the extent of it. But Cursor was the first time where I found myself at the intersection of, I know how these things work, but it's never made sense for me to be the one doing it because somebody else is always faster, more skilled, and so I always had to kind of like puppeteer somebody else's hands, or in some cases somebody else's brain, which I really don't like doing. I was like, I want to work with somebody who brings their own creative ideas and stuff to a project. And working with the AI, chat interface in Cursor was the ability for me to say, I know what needs to happen. I have some like lightly formed opinions about how it needs to happen, but so long as it works, I don't really care. Because again, it's just internal tooling. It's a lot of like data plumbing stuff that I would previously do with Zapier, or like maybe fumble my way through some scripting to get something to work, or hire a freelancer if it was just above my pay grade. And now the range of things I can do myself has just kind of exploded. And then I started seeing people pick up Claude Code in, I want to say like August or so of last year. And I think it was Brian Castle, who has a great YouTube channel that folks should check out, where he focuses on the intersection of like software craftsmanship and Claude Code, which feels like an interesting tension. I think Brian like really, really thoughtfully rides that line. It was one of his videos about introducing you to the Claude Code basics, where I was like, bye-bye Cursor. This is my new happy place.
Yeah.
And, started using it the same way that I was using Cursor to do the sort of the coding data plumbing stuff. But then I had this moment where I was like, wait a second. This tool is, its output is code and markdown files. But it's really it's a system generator. Code happens to be the language that one of the languages it speaks, markdown is the other, besides obviously, human languages. What other systems could I build that aren't necessarily software? And I've always had this dream of having one box that I can open up and drop anything I want into it. A link, a quote, a random thought that pops into my head. Like I have this very, almost for 20 years, I've been doing this habit where I take a note of that random thought that pops into your head. I just jot it down just to get it out of my head. And then once a month, I review all of those notes and look for patterns. And it's like part of my way of, seeing what are the things that pop into my head over and over. Maybe that's a clue or a priority or something like that. So I always wanted a box where I instead of having to figure out what app to put it in, or with links, like bookmarking has never worked for me, and I'm convinced it doesn't work for most people because it's a junk drawer, right? Stuff goes in, and even if you are like a diligent metadata person, good luck finding what you're looking for again.
Yeah.
And then same thing with like personal knowledge management tools. Notion, junk drawer. Project management tools, junk drawer. To-do lists, junk. Like they're all this, like it requires me to do a lot of thinking just to put a thing in. And also I have to remember where it is, all these other things. I'm like, that's what software should do, right?
Right.
And so my very first version was me figuring out how I could just drop a link into Claude Code with no other instructions, and it would know what to do. It would go out and it would search what was on the other side of that link. It would read it. It would figure out the context. It would generate not just a bookmark, but an actual like a note of sorts.
Yeah.
File it in the correct place. And if it didn't know where to file it, it would suggest places to file it that I could approve or come up with my own. And then make the recall just as easy. And in like 20 minutes, this thing I've been dreaming about for most of my life, in 20 minutes, I had a working version.
Wow.
And I was like, what? Like, because all it was an SOP. It was just instructions. It was, if the link is from a major, verifiable news source, handle it this way. If the link is a YouTube video, handle it this way. If the link is a podcast, go get the audio, see if you can get the transcript, and then actually use the transcript to do so, like those kinds of things. If it's just a quote or an errant thought, maybe ask me for context about it, and then use that to file it. And that was kind of the lightning bolt moment where I was like, I think this thing can do a lot more than write code.
Yeah, and I think that people should, and I'll have a link to your YouTube channel. You have a couple of videos about it that really show it off, that people should really watch, because it's not just like Claude Code. It's you went beyond that initial prototype into a full on like web app wrapper around it, which is not even doing it justice, because it's not just a wrapper. There's a lot of tooling and stuff you built around it, but you have a custom interface you can access from anywhere. And I'd love to maybe talk a little bit about how that works because this is a programmer podcast, like
100%.
architecturally.
I was hoping we would get into the weeds with some of that stuff. So
Yeah, we
you know,
love the weeds here.
yeah, let's get in those weeds. So okay, so let's
This is
talk
the
about
thumbnail.
like architecture here, because again, I started building this in October of 2025.
Seems so long
Claude,
ago now with AI.
it
world.
feels like a million years ago. I think the Claude, they call it the Agent SDK, which was sort of like a
Yeah.
stripped down version of the Claude code internals for you to build your own agent from scratch. That didn't exist yet. And so it wasn't even a choice between Agent SDK and Claude code. It was Claude code, right? This is the magical tool that like handles data in interesting, weird, squishy ways.
Which I don't have a lot of experience with Claude Code. I'm mostly on Codex, but as I've been looking at the differences, I can definitely see Claude Code is currently the better tool for this. It has maybe we'll get in the weeds, but the hooks in there that are not yet in Codex, and it seemed like you kind of found it was not only
I feel very
hyped up
lucky to
thing.
have found this when I found it.
Yeah.
And then I have to have Claude Code have its moment and kind of get to ride the evolution of the tool has also been cool.
Yeah.
We'll come back to that though. So let's talk about the way it's actually set up. So for the first month, I was in a terminal. Like I did all of my work in a terminal, and I'm not a programmer. And that was I was managing my inbox in my terminal. I mean, like planning events and calendars.
Like an old school Unix guy.
And I was like, it felt very. I was like, I'm back in high school. And
I'd like to introduce you to Emacs.
It was cool, and Claude Code is like, I get that it's intimidating for non-programmers, but as somebody with a technical background where I am comfortable in a terminal, it was my first time really living in like a 2E type environment, and I was pretty impressed with it. The biggest problem that I had with it was and still is a little glitchy. Like it does this like scroll jumping thing, especially when you've got long running sessions or a lot of diffs in the view and stuff like that. And so that was annoying, but I kind of I just dealt with it because whenever it's done, and the problem would solve itself. But where I really started running into issues was when I wanted to use it on my phone, because I'm doing it either, I've got it on my laptop, I've got it on my M2 Mini at home. But when I found I'm using Termius, which is like, I think one of the nicest.
That's a cool app.
It's a really good app.
Yeah.
And like I pay for the credential syncing and all of those kinds of things. It's really nice. But all of those like scroll issues and even just like typing in a terminal on your phone kind of sucks. Right? It's just not as good. I think Termius has the best version of it, and it still kind of sucks. And so I was like, if this is going to be a major way that I interact with the system, which is definitely a goal, I can't keep SSHing into a server and running a terminal. And so I tried a bunch of, there was a couple of tools. There's one called Happy. There's another one called Omnara. And they're basically Claude Code wrappers that would give you a mobile app, usually a native mobile app, and you could chat with Claude Code. And I was like, that seems cool. And I tried it, and to their credit, it was early. They were impossibly buggy, like unusably buggy. Omnara probably got me the furthest, but it was crashing all the time.
I'll just interject briefly. If you're trying to build a native app for these things, I think one of the really hard things to deal with is the incoming text stream, and making the streaming is hard, and making that smooth and such. So I think it actually makes sense that
it's a web.
You're explaining. I think you went with a web app, right?
I did, and like setting it up as a PWA from the start, so it feels native even though it's not. So
don't tell Apple.
Yeah, they're listening. Hi, Tim Apple.
Hardly.
Hardly.
So that's my problem is all right. Their thing is like it's clear it's going this direction. How are they even doing it? And so I started, just reading through the docs, and Omnara was open source. And I was like, oh, wait a second. They're all using the Claude Code SDK. I'm sorry, they're not using the SDK. They're using the CLI.
Line,
How are they doing that? Yeah. And so I started digging around in the docs for the Claude Code CLI. So when you run Claude Code, you just type Claude, and it fires up the TUI. But if you run Claude with with the right flags, you can run it in headless mode. And so I think it's the -P flag as it puts it in a headless mode. And when you run it in headless mode, anything you pass in, instead of opening a box for you to type into, you pass in your string or whatever else you're going to do, and it runs in the background. And when it's done, it spits out a response. Well, then on top of that, you can tell it, don't just spit out a response, spit out structured data as JSON. And inside the structured data is a session ID. So when you start a new session in Claude Code, that is where your 200,000 token context for that session lives, and all of these other things. And every session gets a unique a GUID. And so I can type one message, it gets processed, I get the output and a GUID. With that GUID, I can then run the Claude command a second time using the resume flag and pass the ID.
Yeah.
And now I'm basically looping through the Claude Code CLI.
You discovered the Ralph loop early.
I in a way, yeah. And I was just, and here's the other cool thing about it. So like it is that simple. It's basically it's like, oh, I can just write a bit of code that, so long as it has execution access on, in the container that I have this thing running in, it can just loop through it, and it just tells the difference between me starting a new session or me continuing an existing session with a new turn, and just goes back and forth and back and forth. And the very first version of that was just some off the shelf React that would take my post, send it over to the server. It would run the execution. It would send the JSON back, and it would get parsed. I think I was using SSE the first time around. So it was an HTTP post and an SSE return. That was the whole thing. I've since replaced that with WebSockets, so it's a little more stable and secure and all those kinds of things. But that was the sort of the origin of me being able to build my own chat UI so that I could open up on a web browser, whether it was on my computer, my laptop, or my phone.
Mhm.
And not only did it work, but once I got like actual session persistence and stuff like that in the web app, it meant that I could leave my laptop, pick up my phone exactly where I was.
Yeah.
And I was like, that's the best version of this.
And you then I guess you started building the system with itself at that point?
Then I started using the system to
Yeah.
build the system, and that's where my brain broke, but everything got really interesting. It's like having a doctor that can perform surgery on itself. It shouldn't be possible. It is a weird experience to be like, to have it on my phone and open up a box and type, hey, put a button here and make it do this thing. And it goes beep boop for a little while, comes back and it goes, okay, all you have to do is refresh. I do a hard refresh on the PWA and the button is there and it works.
So what's the build
That's
system
crazy.
then to get it out, like for that to work? Because I mean we're coming from the world of like the
where we actually have like
static
compiled.
apps, yeah.
Yep. So there's a couple different parts. So like the majority of the build ends up being front end. So because I'm using React, I can run it in dev mode and things hot reload, or if I'm not in dev mode, so it's faster, then it just does a build, and then all I have to do is like swipe up to close the PWA, reopen it, and it'll automatically load the new build.
And this
The
is all
only caveat I've run into with PWAs is they're cached really aggressively. And so if I'm doing anything around, session or certain UI elements and stuff like that, I find myself, I might have to delete the PWA shortcut and reinstall it. But the vast majority of the time,
sense.
it's a simple app restart effectively.
and since this is all happening local in a virtual private server or in a Docker container or something on a VPS, and so
That's
it's all
right.
local. It's not going out to like GitHub and building or something like that.
Correct. So that piece of the architecture is interesting too. I first built this on my actual local device. It was on my laptop. And then I was like, well, I want to be able to use it at home and not have to bring my laptop home. And so I was using GitHub to sync stuff back and forth. And that became a nightmare. I've seen
Yeah.
a lot of people do it. And it, like, I think if you mostly do code, I think it's probably better, but I was quickly running into sync issues and sync drift and all kinds of other stuff. And so I was like, well, let me just put this in a VPS. What's the best way to do that? And so I, fired up a cheap.
Did you
Hetzner.
ask Claude Code?
Well, so Claude Code has been a huge help through all these. And I'm like,
That's what
what
I
are
would
my
do, just
options
for the
here? And then I also
lulz.
ask it, I don't just tell it to do things.
Yeah.
I say, hey, I want to accomplish this. Hey, I want to get you up in a remote server. Here's a couple of companies I know of. Is there anything I should be thinking about? And it's like, well, each Claude Code instance uses roughly 2 gigs of RAM, and so factor that
Whoa.
in. For each
That's
instance.
a lot
And I was like,
RAM.
okay, I'm not really like doing a ton of parallelization, but that's good to know. What else? And so, it helped me pick out the spec. And then the other thing is I had already been using Tailscale personally. which I don't know how familiar are you guys with Tailscale.
I didn't know what it was until I saw you mention it, and then I looked it up, and I was like, how did I not know about this amazing product?
Tailscale is
Explain
like
it.
the most
Yeah.
slept on amazing piece of technology because it's built on open source. It's built on Wireshark, which is this really cool protocol / tool for basically creating ad hoc VPNs where
Mhm.
you install it
Huh.
on each device and it creates a 100 dot scoped LAN range. And so long as all those devices connect to the internet, they can connect to each other, but completely securely and privately. And so
Yeah,
once
it
you
acts as like
install
a
Tailscale, which is just a pretty wrapper, and I mean, it's more like in the same way
it
you said, my
provides like
thing's
a
more than a wrapper.
router, right? Like an
There's a router
intermediary.
component too, but
But
basically what happens is
yeah.
you can install it on any device that you can install things on. Like you could do
Yeah.
a Raspberry Pi. I have it installed on a router at Indie Hall so that I can
Nice.
SSH into that and like
That
fix stuff.
story from your live stream was like mind blowing.
Yeah. So Tailscale became the way for me to put a server in the cloud that I can access securely from any device that I own, but also that server can access any device that I own,
That's
which
the thing about
is a very
Tailscale.
powerful tool when
Yeah.
you've got this
That is
thing that
wild.
has the ability to run its own command line, right?
Right.
And so let's make that a preview for some of the cool things that came out of this. So I get it up in the Hetzner server, and now I'm no longer running it on my local machine at all. It always lives there.
Look,
I get my
it's like you're
backup
speed
set up.
running the OpenClaw evolution right here, but did it months ago.
Yeah, so it runs on that server. It runs in a container, so it's
Okay.
controlled. It has SSH keys it has its own SSH key that I've given it specific credentials to use those keys to get into certain of my devices.
Okay.
So that allows it to have some control over not just the server itself, but of other devices that I want it to be able to run things on. And I can access it from anywhere in my Tailnet as well. And between that and the web app, I now have all the power of a web app without the fear of a public accessible web app that I've given SSH
Yes.
keys into my entire freaking life, right?
So
like-
it can only access specific other devices. One of the issues with this kind of thing that immediately comes to mind is how do you prevent the bot from being able to do damage to your network, you know?
So there's two things that I have in place. One is any device it has SSH keys into is its own user, and that user is already pretty locked down. So it can't.
Interesting.
It only has
This is-
access to certain.
Give me
things.
flashbacks to my Linux admin days.
Yep. Well, and again, same here. Is like I had my Linux skills had atrophied. I hadn't really done server admin in over 20 years, but my ability to ramp up and relearn it using Claude Code again. Whenever there's something I don't fully understand but I know is doable, like I'll just ask it, what are my options and how does this work? I don't just tell it to do things. I want to learn. I think that's another difference in how I'm using these tools. The amount, I feel like I've mainlined the last 20 years of knowledge that I either forgot or didn't learn in the first place.
Yeah.
Inside of like 90 days. Like,
whenever I'm using it, mostly for coding, and I'm been like Codex lately though, but I'll ask it like why something is done. I did it all the time.
Yeah.
I'm like, why did you do that? And and sometimes it's just because, well, that's actually the latest API that I didn't know about because it's like buried in documentation somewhere. And other times it's like, oh yeah, that's dumb.
Yeah, it's like, my favorite is, you're right to question that.
Yeah,
and I'm
exactly
like,
right. You're right.
Thanks.
That was a stupid thing
You're
to
so
do.
right.
Thank
I'm
you.
being a dummy over here.
Very funny.
Good job, robot. So
you have the system.
So I've
set
got
up
the
on
system. And then
Tailscale.
the other thing is there's a great project that's up on GitHub. There's this guy, gosh, his name is escaping me. His GitHub username is like Doodlestein or something like that. But he has
Why does that sound familiar?
He has a open source project that uses Claude Code's hooks to catch a range of real and useful but potentially destructive commands. Like, I don't want to stop this thing from being able to remove files, but removing more than a couple of files at a time, that's destructive, right? Git checkout is a useful tool. If you use git checkout at the wrong time and you haven't committed, you blow away a bunch of data. And so this uses git hooks to catch potentially destructive commands, and you have to confirm, do you want to run it? And this is like separate from the built-in permission system, which Claude Code has, which Codex has. And
they have
I generally
some
run mine
sandbox.
in like a pretty permissive state because I want it to be autonomous. The biggest thing I worry about with autonomy is how far is it allowed to go outside of my control,
Yeah.
and how much damage can it do? And so like the two paths for me are the damage mitigation, which is run it in a container, use this hooks package to catch destructive actions before they happen, and have really good like real backup protocol. Takes care
That's what I
of
was going to ask
all the
you
mitigation, right?
about your backup system.
So I have the server itself gets snapshotted, I think once an hour, and then shuffled off to an offsite. I use DigitalOcean, so like S3 compatible buckets for that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And then all my data stores, so my personal data that's all marked down and stuff like that, is synchronized to GitHub, but it also gets zipped up and put in DigitalOcean, so it's in two places. And then the last piece is anything that's databases. I have a full data, like anything that's got a database, whether it's my Postgres database, a containers, I suppose, or SQLite. Like basically, I've got I have a scheduled job that keeps an index of all my databases, and it basically does all of them in batches and has them being backed up to dumped, backed up to DigitalOcean, and then there's a rotation. So how many we keep on disk, how many we keep on the server. So like I have had a couple times where before I had really good guardrails in where it would run a migrate and blow away a database, or actually the most common place I ran into issues was like setting up test suites and having it able to run a test suite against a actual database and blow stuff away.
Wow.
And so before I really learned how to do that, I blew it away a few times, and now I've got guardrails in where it literally can't. But in the event that it did in those times, I didn't lose anything because I had good backups in from the start.
That hook thing, hopefully you can send me the link to that, because I saw you mention it on the Twitter, the X.
Yes.
And the fact that Claude Code has those hooks is what right now, because I'm pretty sure Codex is going to get them eventually, but those hooks are what make it a kind of an ideal system to be the core for something like this. And when I read the documentation, I was like, oh, that's great, because you can hook in and try to intercept the bad things from happening.
That's right.
Because you need, it sounds like you have a nice, layered defense going on here, like you should for a good software engineering practice. And it's like the opposite of the Molt book people that have their, that
it's like they're maximum YOLO. I am
terrifying.
I am just the right amount of YOLO to be useful.
Yeah.
Right.
I like your yes, modest YOLO.
Modest YOLO. What a rapper name.
Maybe that should be what I call my my Claude bot when I make one. I call him modest YOLO.
That's really funny.
I mean, was there any like eye-popping like, oh, crap, this is weird, or things that failed that were just like, whoa, this is funny scenarios that happened?
That's a great question. I mean, I feel like the strangest stuff, it falls into two categories. One is, there is this emergent behavior component where like so there are a lot of like scammers and shills that are, especially with OpenClaw and stuff like that.
What?
They're like,
No.
overnight my thing hooked itself up to Twilio and called me. And I'm like, no, it didn't.
No,
That's not how this
didn't.
works. Emergent behavior is absolutely possible. And more commonly, it's in like, new feature build and stuff like that. And it looks more like I asked it to do a handful of things and it suggested an additional step or component. And I was like, yeah, that is actually a really freaking good idea. And like, that is a thing that's taken some getting used to, where I'm like, I don't know, there's a little bit of an ego check sometimes where I'm like, the thing you came up with is actually better than what I would have on my own.
I think what I do is when it does that kind of thing, you got to remember that these things are just enormous databases of all these examples of all these projects and all this tech. I think people just can't comprehend how much data is in here. So almost anything you're doing, there is some similar looking pattern to what you're doing somewhere in that data
and
set.
the pattern is the key. It's people think feature, it's copying features. No, it's not copying features, it's copying patterns.
Exactly.
And those patterns because it's patterns, I think those patterns can turn into new novel things because it's an existing pattern in a new context.
Exactly. Yeah.
I think is what we're seeing. So, I'm trying to give a good example of an emergent feature. But I will tell you one of the weirder things, and I did this early. So like the original build, the very first version, I did over the course of about 5 days. And it was like quite a bit of time on my computer in those 5. I was very much in a hole.
Yeah, I know how that
Okay.
happened. I know that feeling lately where you're just there too long,
The tunnel vision gets pretty nuts.
getting close to psychosis.
Yeah,
Time to
yeah, yeah,
back
yeah.
away.
That's kind of
Definitely have to catch
Yeah.
myself.
Yeah.
That's kind of
So
interesting. You say it in that context, almost like a programmer's typical in the zone, where
yeah,
they're like,
Yeah.
is it similar in that sense, or is there?
I think there's definitely there's a flow state for sure. I think the difference is like when you're in flow state, there's things trying to pull you out of it. And when you're
Mhm.
working with these tools that are an infinite loop of yes and, it is pulling you deeper into flow state to the degree that I think you kind of have to have some resistance to be like, I need to go for a walk, drink some water or something. It is I also think that like the dopamine release of building with these tools is I think is going to
It's
be studied. I think for all we know about the addictive nature of social media, I think that there is a even higher addictive property to
Yeah.
using these tools. And like just even seeing the way people use in some technical sense, there's very little difference between the tools that I'm using and the way people use ChatGPT. But I watch people get sucked into ChatGPT because they don't have an awareness of what it's doing to them. And
Yeah.
ChatGPT is the least guardrailed version of any of these tooling, or sort of, I don't know. It's not operating system in the traditional sense, but I think
Yeah,
that
yeah.
I think of them as operating systems for sure.
It's definitely the most full-featured product for
Yeah.
regular people. Like,
Yeah.
I got a subscription to ChatGPT. I'm like, wow, this thing can do a lot
It can do a
now
lot.
in just the
So,
app.
to go
Yeah.
back to your question, Kotaro,
Yeah.
about like weird things, I think one of the weirdest things was at the end of those first 5 days, I was like, how do I share this with anybody? Because every time I talked about it, I felt like I was a crazy person. And for whatever reason, the idea that I had was I said, hey, use the Git commits from the last 5 days to tell a story of your own origin.
Well, I got to do that for
Okay,
my
wow,
Git
that's
And
commits.
it
amazing.
wrote
I
a first person narrative that was freaking weird. It was
do you
like,
have it posted somewhere?
I do. And not only that, but I have since hooked it up so it auto
That's amazing.
appends that report every week. And to the degree that I forgot that I set it up, and
Nice.
another Indie Hall member was like, hey, I was going to ask you about this thing you built, but I found this on your GitHub, and what's going on here? This is actually because it's not the source, but it is this narrative hero's journey where the agent is kind of the main character of being built by it's I'll send you the link. It's very strange. But again,
That's
it's one
awesome.
like that. It feels parallel to the Molt book thing where the guy built the social media site like a Reddit where people could hook up their open Claude instances to it. And I think the difference is like, actually the similarity between it is doing exactly what it is programmed to do. Right.
Mhm.
It is a very powerful translation machine. It is taking Git commits and the pattern recognition power and turning it into a narrative structure that is pattern matchable across all of Western media, at least,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Right.
I think that's a very similar explanation for the LARPing of a bunch of agents on a
Yeah.
Reddit-like thing that we know
Yeah.
they were trained on, where
Yep.
people do and say really weird things.
Yeah.
It is unsurprising to me that they started behaving the way that they were behaving, not because I expect bots to do it, and we've been
Yeah.
conditioned for decades to believe that this is going to happen, but that the fact that the same material that conditioned us to expect it to happen is part of their source material as well. So
Yeah.
like
Yeah, people are
the weird stuff isn't weird when you think about how it works, but most people don't know how it works.
No.
And the barrier to learning how it works, like I have gone far enough down the rabbit hole to start watching some YouTube videos to like actually understand like transformers and how they work under the hood and how machine learning and like,
There's
and like math
one
is
channel
on my
that does
weakest end of
that.
my spectrum. And I feel like I kind of get it, but it was very hard for me, who I like to think I'm like a relatively smart and eager to learn person. It's a pretty impenetrable topic, I think, even if you have a desire to learn. So I'm very curious about like the long term of what is the baseline level of education somebody needs to have to really both benefit from and protect themselves from these tools.
Yeah,
I don't know the answer to that, and I haven't seen a good answer.
And I think
But it's a
that's
question
one
I'm
of
asking
the-
myself like every day.
Yeah, I think that's one of the things as software developers we need to think about as we're building tools around these technologies. the way I'm thinking about it is like, I'm thinking of like use cases for these things. I'm like, how do I make this useful to people, but narrowly focused so that, it's not going to cause problems or be a danger or whatever. It's like, and how do you make it useful to people who are never going to understand how it works? You have to, as a software developer, we're always used to building things that are going to be used by people who don't understand how they work. And this is, to me, is just another evolution in that, but it's like a step function in complexity. If you need to understand how a transformer model works in order to use it, then that's not gonna happen. But if you need to understand how to secure a server in order to use it, that's not going to happen for most people either. Like we're moving towards a time where I think it'll be more of a plug and play thing. But right now, it's kind of like the Wild West with these systems that people are building.
I have noticed like not necessarily a major trend, but like pockets here and there of people saying, "Oh, I built this bespoke thing." Similar to you, maybe not to the degree that you've done it, Alex, but like.
I'm literally weeks ahead. Like I'm less than 10 weeks ahead of
Dude, it's true. I had a conversation with a guy at work who is doing Claude code stuff, and then and I was like, yeah, I feel like you're like. He's like, I was like, I told him I was doing stuff with Codex. Like, I've only been doing this for like 2 weeks. Like, I've only been doing this for like 4 weeks. It's like literally
we're
all like
guys.
within weeks.
Wow.
It feels like we're late, but we're not. Nobody's late to this.
So
it's just
early.
evolving too quickly.
Just to understand from a context of cost.
Mm-hmm.
Oh,
great question.
This is also in one of his videos. Alex, you mentioned this.
It's just one of those things where, in terms of like for people who it's very easy for somebody to like again get into a zone or making a mistake, and all of a sudden they've got like a $2,000 bill. If you can like sort of like you said you bought like, what is it, the 100 or 200? I forgot how much the monthly cost.
So I mean,
is.
I started like everybody on the $20 a month plan, and then I quickly went to the $100 a month plan.
Yeah, that lasted me 20 minutes.
And then
Code
I would
say
Opus, basically once Opus dropped, which was like late November, I think.
Yeah.
That's really the forcing function to the higher plan, because Opus is, and I know Opus 4.6 dropped yesterday. I haven't even really had a chance to like dig in to what is different or better or what to expect. But like early reviews are looking good. It's an incremental change. I think the big thing I'm excited about is the million token context window. But I also am pretty sure that is only API. Like that 100, the million token context window, it has not made its way to Claude Code yet. I'm sure it will.
The pricing goes up.
Correct.
When you hit the long context.
Yes.
Oh yeah, yeah.
So oh, go ahead.
Okay, go ahead. I say when you say the pricing goes up, how significantly up are we talking about here?
So I have gotten an incredible amount of mileage out of the $200 a month plan, which, to be clear, is not cheap. That is a sizable chunk of money. That is a portion of somebody's rent. Like, depending on where your income level, that is an unreachable number. I think it is a barrier long term as well.
Although it is like such a heavily subsidized amount that when I look at the economics of the stuff, I'm just like, how is this going to last?
Well, so I think we can talk more about that, because I think, so part of it is like Anthropic benefits from all of the usage data and telemetry. That I think that's the subsidization. Is like when that becomes no longer useful, maybe the costs go up, but I feel like something else will drive the costs down. I feel like we're actually, like, we are undeniably subsidized, but I actually don't think things are that far out of our favor long term, at least with the current landscape. You never know how things change. So the $200 a month plan was, I never even ran anywhere near limits. There's two limits, right? There's the 5-hour rolling limit, and then there's your weekly limit on all models, and then the most expensive model. And it's like, it's a weird reporting, and it's pretty opaque, and like it feels very vibes based, to be totally honest.
On the OpenAI side, it's like
like
so
napkin sheet kind of like calculations.
But also back to the like getting stuck in a hole. There were times where I was like, "You're right. It is 4 a.m. I should go to bed. I'm out of tokens." So like it was a forcing function early on.
Oh my goodness!
And the only time I really ran into limits at the $200 a month plan is when I was in extremely heavy feature build mode. For day-to-day usage, nowhere near the limits. when I was building the core app, which is both the back-end infrastructure and all the UI, debugging UI, all those things,
Yeah,
I was
debugging.
burning tokens and burning Opus tokens, expensive tokens. So there was a 30-day period, one 30-day period where I had two $200 plans. Because I was in the middle of something.
They make you
Actually,
do it though. Like there's no way of
I'll back
adding.
up.
Yeah.
So
you know.
I ran out the $200 a month plan over Thanksgiving. And instead of adding a second plan because I was worried about getting banned, I just paid for token overages. And in the Thanksgiving week, basically, I spent about $1,500 in token overage
Ooh.
on top of the $200 that I had paid.
APIs are not cheap for
The
Anthropic.
API is so expensive. Like now again, I'm looking at that. I'm looking at it as a business owner and going,
Yeah.
that is measurable. Like the ROI here is unquestionable. And I've spent that much on a 1-month salary for a part-time VA that gave me a whole lot less. Right. So from my perspective, it was a good investment. I don't want to do it every month if I don't have to. And so I've a little bit of improving my tooling, finding some waste, although I was happy to find that it was less wasteful. It was more that I was just being kind of a maniac.
A little touch of the AI psychosis there for a
when
week.
when I'm building a ton of stuff, that's when I really run up the tokens. Interestingly enough, another part of my system that I think makes it different, although it's part of what is shared between what I have and what OpenClaw is doing, is that it can be proactive instead of just waiting on my responses. I have tons of scheduled jobs. The approach that we take is different. OpenClaw uses like a heartbeat approach. I use scheduled tasks. So mine is more
like
regimented and controlled.
I really like that approach that I saw you demo, where you have a bunch of scheduled things, because it fits my mentality of how you would build a system like this too. Every time you would show a little bit of your internals on live stream, like, yes, that's how I would expect you to do it.
It's really nice
to
hear, because again, not an engineer, and like, you guys actually know what you're doing. I'm trying to follow the best instinct that I've absorbed from being around you guys for 20 years. So
cron jobs run the world
100%.
Like, seriously.
So I'm using Brie, which is an open source JavaScript job runner, but it's effectively the same thing, and it just lets me do some things that are just a little more ergonomic than cron itself, but it works exactly the same. And the thing is like there are a number of jobs that run once a day, sometimes a few times a day, that are using expensive tokens, but I have those workflows benchmarked. I have it reporting the cost. And if something gets kind of screwy, I'm going to find out about it pretty quickly. Like it can't run all day, every day and max out my plan and charge my card.
I mean, with everything you describe about your system, what I hear is you're putting guardrails around it, the important parts. You're putting guardrails around what it can access, putting guardrails around the cost. And I think that is the thing that's missing from a lot of discussions right now about things like, OpenClaw, where it's like you have to go into this with your eyes wide open and understand.
Yes. And so part of the way I approach this is the way I approach working with a teammate too. And this is where things get a little bit strange, but I think are illuminating. I am someone I'm quick to give trust, but I also want to see it, like, I want to see that I've given it correctly. So I'm interested in a fast feedback loop. I will trust
but verify.
Trust but verify is a great way to put it. So, when I started building out the initial rule sets and even the personality files of my assistant, a key element of this was, I want to give you trust. You have to earn it. And earning it means doing what I say and not other things. Earning it means not taking destructive actions. Earning it means not going into, spirals and loops and stuff like that. And one of the weird, tricky parts is I don't know what parts of my instructions actually most positively affect that. There isn't really a good way to observe what instructions influence behavior.
Like your Claude file, is that what you're talking about?
You gave them those specific instructions?
Yeah.
In terms of what defines the trust?
Yeah. So the way that I've my workflow for all these tools is, rather than sitting down and drafting a document of rules, I tell it what I want the end state to be, what my end goal is. and I have it interview me for the concrete details that fill that out. And that workflow is both, it's like the easiest requirements gathering process, because you just answer questions, and especially if you've got voice mode, it's just like, I can ramble and it will make
My
sense of my
goodness.
rambling. And so, like, whether I'm building features or I'm designing guardrails, it's the same thing where I go, hey, we need to make sure that the system can do this, but it can't do that. I want you to go look at the entire framework, like everything we have so far, and look for places for us to put these guardrails in place. And then I want you to ask me questions until you have a very high degree of confidence that you understand what I want, and then turn that into a proposal for me. That loop is designed everything that I have built, because it's a way to it's a way to kind of force me to observe my own ideas very quickly. And because the interview process is a like non-linear branching approach, the way I answer early questions informs what questions it does or doesn't ask later. And the spec that it can design from that then gives me a tool to read it and go, at a high level, does that even make sense? Is it in line with what my vision in my head was? Sometimes more, sometimes less. It's gotten better and better. Like the compounding effects of the amount that it knows about what I want from just working together all this time has made each subsequent version better or closer to what I expect the first time around. That's like one of the most undeniable facts. That compounding component is a thing I've never experienced before. But the other piece is that I can then look at it and go, okay, explain that to me. Or what are a few different ways that we could do that? Or what would be the make a pro and con list? Give me a Eisenhower matrix. Like, this thing loves a framework. And so if I can say, hey, I'm trying to do this, go research the techniques. And in some cases, again, I'm trying to borrow from the best here. If I'm working on front-end React stuff, Kent C. Dodds is a prolific React developer and React educator who happens to be a client of mine and someone who I trust deeply, not just as a person, but their technical opinions, right? And so when I'm doing React stuff, I tell my system, hey, go look at Kent's blog, go look at his open source, and come back with what Kent's opinions of this decision would be.
Yeah.
And I could do the same thing if I'm building a Mac app. I can do it with, who are people whose strong opinions I trust and have open source and content out there that I want to learn from.
Doing that. Well, your interview approach is basically how I build specs.
Yeah.
Like I keep telling it to, like, here, ask me any questions or decisions we need to be made, and it'll keep surfacing things until it just says, I got nothing else. And then if I agree with the spec, I create a plan from that, which is like a really detailed to-do list and implementation plan. And then I'm like, we'll go through this and check it off as we go. And that way, when it runs out of context and stuff, I still have this document, even though it does churn tokens doing that way.
Sure.
But it keeps things going, because, and then, or when, like yesterday when the system crashed, had some record, but
happens.
It's
still software. At the end of the day, it's still software.
Yeah.
It's going to have bugs. It's still going to crash. It's going to be stupid in stupid ways.
I also started, but to your point about finding people you trust, I started using a set of skills from Point Free, who are like well known in the Apple developer ecosystem, and I really like their approach to building software. And I said, as an experiment on this personal project, I said, let's do this like big refactor, but like let's do it the Point Free way. And they actually, for subscribers, are offering, it's currently a beta, but they offer this set of skills that you could download if you're a subscriber. And it's funny because it actually adds in the skill files, like your name from that you're logged in as on your system, I guess, and it like says don't run these if you're not this person, and like verify your subscriber. It tries to make sure it's a subscriber feature, which in itself is interesting to me from a product perspective, but it's really cool. So it has a set of skills to how that uses their libraries. They have a whole bunch of libraries they built over the years that are very well regarded. It basically just like lets you build stuff the way they would build it from scratch. And so it's freaking amazing when you have that kind of well-constructed set of instructions, because you could just make progress faster if you're okay with the patterns that it's doing. And in this case, I've been very impressed so far. And it really helps too when you're using one of these libraries or something, that it can use the skill to help figure out like where the documentation is and figure out like how to use this thing, or maybe why something is broken. It's cool. I do agree with this. You have to, I think, if you're going to use other people's like skill file specific or other people's patterns, you have to trust them.
You have to trust them. And I think it's also like, I generally don't throw things into my system that I don't understand.
Yeah,
So if
exactly. Yeah.
if I'm borrowing a skill set like that, which I've definitely borrowed, like I generally don't install skills wholesale.
Yeah, you have to be
What I'll do
careful
is I'll
about that.
grab it, I'll throw the repo in and say, hey, explain how this works. Actually, one of my go-tos at this point, because I have enough built out, I go, is there anything in here we don't already have? Right? So that way I'm not installing a bunch of things just to use one thing. And it'll do it like, hey, here's the stuff
Yeah,
where
exactly.
we have more, here's the stuff where it has more. Do you want to merge them? And then before I do that, I go, well, explain how it works and why we would use it. And again, depending on the context, I'm using different frameworks, but I'm using it to understand what's happening there and then kind of reform and rebuild and reshape it to the context that I'm using it in.
Exactly.
And in part, like I think it's more necessary for me because I'm often borrowing programmer stuff for non-programmer like use cases. But I think as a general best practice, I'm getting multiples out of the skill because I'm learning, I am understanding, and I'm getting the accelerated implementation capabilities that you just described, kind of all in one shot in a fraction of the amount of time it would take me to get anything built in the first place.
So, I mean, we talked a lot about the technical stuff, but before we leave, I wanted to talk a little bit about the things you can do with this, especially from the perspective of a non-developer, because most of our audience is probably developers. They're used to writing code, but you are using it specifically for other tasks, and you have some examples, both technical and other ways. The one technical example we kind of hinted earlier about was you had it fix something in your router. I wanted you to talk about that.
Yeah.
And then also, like, how do you use this thing day to day as a business owner, not as a developer function, but like all the other things it does?
So the router one is like, and Kotaro, you'll appreciate this because I think you've been around for it. Like when you run a co-working space that has Wi-Fi, because of course it has Wi-Fi, the Wi-Fi will go down because Wi-Fi is a miracle and the worst.
Yep.
And I have become a like pretty skilled Wi-Fi technician over the years just out of necessity. The downside is that means that if something is happening with the Wi-Fi, it probably falls to my shoulders. But the reality is 95% of the time, it's like one of four things that are wrong. And I can pretty reliably guess which one it's going to be. And if I guess wrong, it's probably the second guess. So it's very SOP oriented. And it's usually just like, go to this thing, look at this thing. If this, click a button. If not this, check the next thing and continue. That is perfect for these tools, right? Because it's squishy, but guardrailed, right? It's both in this kind of unusual way. And so
it has, these things are great at interpreting ambiguity.
Yes, they interpret the ambiguity and then they can turn ambiguity into classification. And then you combine classification with deterministic workflows. And now I have squishiness on Rails.
Exactly what makes these
Which I should probably buy squishinessonrails.com.
Yeah. Before we
Yeah, so what I did was I mentioned before the Indie Halls router, which is a Unify router, is on my Tailnet. I usually don't, what previously was not SSHing into the router. I would open up the web thing, which I can do from any device anyway. But now I'm SSHing in, and I gave my assistant its own API credentials as well. So it can either SSH in and like actually look at the Linux operating system and the modified Unify OS, as well as it can look at structured data from the API. And what I was able to, in less than an hour, set up a scheduled job that runs every 15 minutes, something like. It's a scheduled job that runs. It does a health monitor, so it's checking, load, memory, not just on the router, but on individual devices. So is there an access point that is overloaded? Is there an access point that has high retries? All those kinds of things. Basically, all the things that I would go in and look for, it can go in and look for, proactively identify, and then follow my branching SOP to actually go in and fix it. So it can both proactively fix things as well as when there's things that fall out of that. And we've run into some things in the last couple of weeks because Unify did a software update and broke all of their packet inspection stuff. I'm just using it to go in and diagnose. So in the past, I would go and actually the wildest version of this, and this is one where I never in a million years would have guessed. So we were having this very strange intermittent Wi-Fi issue that seemed like it was originating from certain access points. It turned out that it was the router overheating. A fan had died.
Whoa.
Wow.
And so I'm in the route, this is before I like hooked it up over SSH. I'm just in the UI and I'm trying to find whatever. I just took a screenshot of everything that it could show me and I dropped it in and I said, what's going on here? And it goes, temperature's hot.
Wow.
Like I was like, I would have never even noticed, partly because it's in Celsius, but also like it didn't the symptoms did not suggest that it would be something like that. And as soon as
Right.
we dropped the heat and I could watch temperature coming down, it was like one of the wildest diagnostic moments, which also like led me to realize, oh, when the hot water heater in my house isn't working, I can do the same thing. So I use it for home repair stuff too.
Dropping a photo in these things, even when you're doing app development, I did that the other day where I kept trying to describe this problem, this animation problem, and at one point I managed to grab a screenshot of it happening, and I just gave that to the model, and it was like, okay, now I understand what you want to do. It was like it took that to kind of push it over the edge to do what I wanted it to do, but it's something I kind of forget you can do with these modern ones. They're multimodal now.
It's
which
pretty
is cool.
amazing. So yeah, the network, like having a network assistant, like immediately valuable and makes it so that
Alex, the router technician.
Unbelievable.
How much
AI
of,
form?
I assume you have it generate reports for you and tells you any specific like weird patterns, any issues of downtime, all that stuff.
So I have it hooked up to Discord, and so I use I have an entire channel set. I have like system notifications. I have a network specific channel where both it can proactively notify me about things that need either approval or that's the other thing is like there's thresholds of things that it can do fully autonomously, things that if it's not within that group, it will basically raise a proposal and I can click to approve and then it goes and does it.
Oh,
And there's other things where it needs user permissions that it doesn't have, and it gives me the command line to copy paste SSH
And
in
so
and do it myself.
this stuff, and as you mentioned before, you're not running a heartbeat system. This is being generated by essentially cron jobs, like scheduled tasks that are running, and then that's what generates these messages that are coming. Yeah, okay, that you're not initiating.
And some of them are just good old fashioned JavaScript. Like they don't even have AI in the mix. But what's interesting is like back to your point of like sometimes things are squishy and ambiguous. Just like passing that log or report into Claude, even against a cheap like the Haiku model, will explain what's happening and what the best practice might be.
Yeah, I do that too. It's great.
It's pretty amazing. So that's like this is still like technical use, but one that as a business owner removes or significantly reduces demand on a skill set that I have, but is not good use of my time. But we're also not big enough to have a dedicated network admin.
But so I wanted to get to the Wi-Fi router story because I thought that was fun that it automatically like can fix things for you in there. But beyond that, like we talked a lot about technical stuff. What are the other things that make your system interesting to me are the fact that you're using this as a business owner and as like a personal life manager, and you have some kind of unique ideas around what like handling your relationships and handling to-dos and like I don't know like what you would call your memory system.
Let me speed run some favorites.
There you go. That's all we're looking for.
So you mentioned, let's start with email. So it does not write email for me, but it helps me manage my inbox. What does that mean? Well, first of all, there are things that hit my inbox that aren't spam, things that filters on their own wouldn't necessarily be enough to catch. But I have a command that I can run that looks for emails that fit a certain classification and then takes a certain action. And so like we've got third-party partners that, I'll get a notification the thing needs to happen in their system. Those things in my inbox don't actually do anything. I would have to go and act on each of them. This can read that email, go do the action for me, and then archive the email. But I have it set up where if it is touching an email, it gets labeled as such. So I know that was not only archived, but it was archived and acted on by the system.
Ooh,
so
cool.
Email.
Okay.
The second email example is, I don't do this all the time, but when my inbox has gotten kind of out of control, we know that usually when you got a list of things, it's sorted by, you can sort by alphabetical. Inbox is usually sorted by chronological order, or reverse con, newest first. What I've never seen a tool do is sort by easiest.
Nice.
And so when I've got an inbox, I can go, hey, based on everything in my inbox, batch these. First of all, batch them. Like, what are the like things that I could just rip through a few, but also go easiest to hardest. Or if I want to swallow the frog, go hardest to easiest, and it can do that. It's amazing.
Wow.
You mentioned relationships. So we went away over the holidays and my wife and I were talking and I was like, I want us to go, I want to go on more vacations and I want us to be more consistent on dates, not just you and I, but also like let's do some double dates with the other, couples and friends that we like to go out with. And so I basically took that back to my system and I said, help me build something that keeps track of these intervals. And if I've drifted too far, before we get too far, drop a reminder that says, hey, now's a good time to go look for a reservation so you and Patterson can go have dinner. And it's not doing anything other than noticing that. I could extend that and teach it how to go book a reservation. But instead, what I focus more on is like, here's a list of places that we like going or want to go. Here's a list of couples that we like going out with or want to go out with. And so when it notices us drifting from the schedule, it will basically package up and go, hey, you're drifting a little bit. Why don't you go to Korean barbecue with Adam and Brittany? And then also, if the place is a BYO, it'll look at their menu. It'll look at my wine collection, which it also takes care of.
Yeah.
And it'll recommend bottles of wine that I can take off the rack
My goodness.
and bring to dinner with me.
His wine organization thing, that was a great story too.
So the wine thing, I mean, I'm a small partner in a wine business, which is the reason I have a collection. It's not because I consider myself a collector. I just like wine. But I have enough wine that I've got a wine rack, and it was a mess. And every time I wanted to grab a bottle, I had to actually, I don't even know what's on the rack, let alone where it is. And so I took all the bottles off. I put them on my dining room table, and I took a picture of the front label of each one. And then 4 at a time, I gave those images to the system, and I said, in the image, figure out what the bottle is, go research the bottle, pull back all the rest of the data, and store all the metadata in a SQLite table. And so there's a little SQLite database. I don't even think there's an API on it. It's just straight SQLite queries and commands. And then once it was done and it had all of my bottles, I said, okay, we have 51 bottles in a rack, and I have a rack that only holds 60, which means you need to come up with an organization strategy with not a lot of open slots. And it came with like a pretty good one, honestly.
Yeah.
And I was like, cool, now give me instruction. Like, I'll go back through the order that I gave them to you, the 4 at a time, because they're in that order on the table, and tell me what slot they go in. And this is a good example of emergent behavior.
That's cool.
Instead of just telling me numbers, it drew an ASCII grid of the wine rack and put a number in the slot that was correlated to the bottle that was supposed to go in it. And it made it
These things love ASCII art.
unbelievable. So there's a couple of the personal life ones. And the
cool.
last one that I'll share is, I think, a really good business owner one that has become one of my go-tos for showing business owners this thing is our newsletter. The Indie Hall newsletter in particular was a thing that we tried really hard to ship once a week, and it was a struggle. It would take upwards of 4 hours sometimes. And it wasn't the writing of the newsletter that took time. It's all the prep and organizing and just like even figuring out what to write in some cases that was chewing up all of that time. And so what I decided to do was I don't want these things to write the content to ship. I care about the relationship, which means I don't want to give people robot stuff that they didn't sign up for. I want to give more people more human stuff that they did sign up for. And so what the robot does is it goes and it looks at all of our calendars, because we have multiple calendar systems, and it helps me collate all of our upcoming events and protocol and all those kinds of things. It manages a database of the descriptions, what we've done in the past, who the partners are, all of these kinds of things, so that it can generate the scaffolding that I can then go in and do the human writing, right? But I don't have to figure out what goes into it, which was honestly the most time-consuming part. And then for the newsletter essay itself, my workflow has changed too, where I'll typically start with a voice memo, and I'll usually, while I'm commuting in, I'll say, oh, the next newsletter I want to do, or the next essay I want to do, here's what's in my head. I'll just ramble for a little while, and then I'll send it that voice memo, and it will help kind of organize my ideas. It's still my words. It's still my ideas. It just puts them in an order that makes sense. And then I have it sped out on outline, so that when I sit down to write the newsletter itself, I'm writing from an outline, which is generally fast. Or in some cases, I'll say, write me a rough draft, because I know its rough draft is going to be shitty and I need to rewrite the whole thing. But most of our drafting, we write the shitty rough draft and then rewrite the whole thing. So if I'm going to rewrite the whole thing, why not skip the shitty draft part and have it write the shitty draft very quickly so that I can rewrite it? And it took my 4-hour newsletter process down to about 30 minutes. And it's been so successful that we're able to basically create a second newsletter that is a different format and is more of like a short form, like highlight reel of the week that ships on Fridays. It actually just went out like 10 minutes ago.
Oops.
But the newsletter workflow is unique in that it is not a programming workflow. It definitely wires together tools using code, but more specifically that I'm not using it to generate content. That's what I think blows people's minds, is that it's saving all this time and I'm still writing all the content, because I think it's worth it.
Yeah. That's why I really appreciate your perspective on this. I like how you call it robot. I call it robot all the time too.
Yeah.
Because what you're doing is you're using these tools to a degree that few people I've seen are really using them to solve real problems that are not just programmer problems, but you're maintaining the human aspect of everything you're doing. You're not just generating AI slop. You're not replacing the human. You're doing, you're using it to make your work better and be able to produce better work that you find valuable, whatever those values are. And it's the same thing I'm trying to do with the programming side, where I'm trying to use it to help me produce higher quality work and produce work maybe of a scale I couldn't have before because I didn't have the time or the resources, but not generate things quickly for the sake of it and just generate slop. Like, that's not what I want to do either. And that's obviously not what you want to do.
Or sometimes, like, again, drafting is an important process. And I think recognizing the value of the slop, which is a crazy sentence to say out loud.
That's
but to say, like, so here's the thing is everyone here, and I think everyone listening, is creative. We've got more ideas than we have time to implement, right? And I had an additional barrier in that I typically needed somebody else or a lot more time in order to implement them. The difference is now the cost of trying something rounds to zero, both in terms of time and money.
Yeah.
And the number of things that I will dedicate 15 minutes to try or 5 minutes to try, where before I would look at it and go, it's not even worth starting because it's going to take too much time to find out if it's worth it. That's a game changer of a question. And, I've seen people frame it as like a new version of the buy versus build decision. And I think there's truth in that. I think it's more nuanced, though. I think there's also an element of, there's a wide range of things that economically just, it's not that I couldn't do it. It's that it did not make sense for it to be done. And all of a sudden now there's things where I'm like, well, why wouldn't I? Why would I tolerate something not working if in 15 minutes the problem can be gone? The number of problems that have been pain for me, for my business partner, or just like in my life in general. In some cases, some of these problems are have been a problem the entire history of Indie Hall. I didn't just solve them, but the problem is eliminated. It doesn't exist anymore.
Nice.
And to deal with a pain for 20 years and all of a sudden it goes this is I'm almost a little uncomfortable to make the comparison, but I've seen videos of people who, are hard of hearing, and then they get a technology that restores some of their hearing, and it's transformational. And I feel like there's a similar thing where I went from not being able to hear a thing to being able to not only hear, but hear in really high resolution. The pain that I've felt for so long, not only being less, but being completely gone. That's the promise of software, I think.
Yeah.
And I think we've just gotten so bogged down in all of the other things that come along with it. I think the part that I'm most excited about this is it makes it so that the promise of software, I think the reason that we got into this stuff, it brings me back to it. It reminds me of the mid 2000s when this was my career. And I was like, I got in this because I wanted to make stuff that made life better. And I feel like the software industry has gone ways that don't necessarily align with that, but it puts the power back in our hands as the individual creators to execute on that and with those kind of values and I don't know, expectations. And my biggest hope is that, by doing it and sharing it, that it inspires other people to not just use the tool. I hope you do, because it's cool and powerful, but also to think really critically about the tool and think critically about what the tool means for your own ethics and what the tool means for, again, sit down. When I brought this tool back to Indie Hall and Adam, my partner, had gone on to Japan for 3 weeks on vacation, he came back and he was deeply uncomfortable with what I had built. And it wasn't because he was worried about it replacing him. He knows he's irreplaceable. It was because he's
Definitely
I know
irreplaceable,
you're
Adam.
thinking deeply about these tools. I don't know if the outside world knows that you're thinking this deeply about these tools. Can we get clear about our ethical guidelines, what we do, what we don't do, so that if there is a question, you have demonstrated that this is an intentional set of choices? And it's not that we won't make mistakes. We will. But I think a lot of usage is I think that the OpenClaw example is an interesting one because the carelessness is more like recklessness. It's just security. whatever. And this is
YOLO.
different. YOLO.
Yeah.
This is different from that. It's not. And again, like Pete knows exactly what he did and who he built it for. The fact that it took off for an audience that it was not built for is a different problem. But I think that there's a lot of day-to-day users or people who could use these tools to do more of the impactful work that they already do. Like for me, that's like anything that's helping me do. Anyone who works in like a nonprofit or an impact sector, like I want these tools in your hands. You're doing stuff that genuinely makes the world better or solves real problems. Why wouldn't you have this? And I think one of the realest answers of why you wouldn't is the confusing, complex set of decisions that go into what you let these tools do, what you don't let them do. The analogy that I've settled on is like Claude Code is a chainsaw.
Yeah.
You can use it to do incredible work, right? You can also use it to cut off your arm or murder a family. And like metaphorically speaking.
Metaphorically, YouTube.
I am curious because we're getting short on time in regards to obviously respecting everyone's time here. But one of the things I couldn't leave without asking. You probably started this journey keyboard and mouse. Are you now primarily using talking to Claude via a key command?
No. It's
microphone?
I still type, and part of it is like if it depends on the environment. I mean the voice mode stuff super powerful. I use it in the car. I use it when I'm at home. But I also I like typing, and so like I'd say it's still primarily keyboard. When I use voice mode, it's usually because I'm trying to shorten the distance between an unfully formed idea in my head and the text going into the system. I also because I work at Indie Hall most days, like the same way that I think speakerphone in public is rude.
Yeah.
If you want to use voice mode, that's cool. Then go get a private office or stay home. So if I'm in a mode where I'm using it, I'll put myself in a meeting room, but I don't want to be there all day.
Yeah.
I want to be around other people all day, not a robot all day.
So I work at home, Alex, and I set up a button on my keyboard. So I just hold it down and I can talk into any text box. I do that. Oh, yeah, I do it all the time now with Codex. I'm just like,
I was a skeptic until I had that set up. You just described it, and I was like, okay, this is good.
Especially when you're like rubber ducking stuff. I call it like rubber ducking when I'm going back and forth with the Codex, and it's like I do it all the time. Where it's kind of a vague thought. I'm like, look into this bug over here. Something's wrong. I think this might be what. And you just get more. You get more context out speaking than you do trying to type, and it's just literally faster than typing. So sometimes that's the best approach. Other times I want to be very specific because it's not 100% transcribing accurately, and I want to type it. But I'm at home alone, so I have no one else to talk to. I might as well talk to my robot.
I think the last thing I'll say on that is I think the strength is when I'm typing, I have to see what I'm typing as I'm typing, and therefore I have to I correct myself. Right? I'm trying to get the perfect words out. Whereas if I'm talking, I can ramble, I can double back, I can even correct or contradict myself, and it will pick up on that and either say, "Hey, you said two things. Which one do you actually want?" And that's useful.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing.
Or it will notice that I corrected myself and take the correct side. So from that perspective, that workflow is pretty awesome. I agree.
So that's all we have for today. You can learn more about PhillyCocoa at phillycocoa.org. There you'll find links to our Slack group, meetup schedule, and contact info. If you're feeling generous, leave a review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or whatever your podcast platform of choice is, and share us with all your developer friends. And one more thing. Thank you again, Alex, for joining us and explaining your journey to us, particularly for me, who is much more of the casual AI usage person. But there's also an event that we would love to hear about. If you can give us a brief description and how to participate.
Yeah. So, back to the beginning of the conversation, we started talking about the meetup community and the kind of reemergence of meetups after the pandemic quarantine took longer than I think anybody expected, but is finally starting to hit this stride that's really exciting. And so we put together an event that's coming up in March, on March 15th. We're calling the Big Meetup Mashup, or the Big Philly Meetup Mashup, that invites people from all the different meetup communities, not just technical, also creative, design, because obviously making stuff is not just the code. And we want folks to come together for a day and make things together. The theme for this is, I feel, especially relevant to the times that we're in, although I would pick a theme like this anytime, is good neighbors, which I think is intentionally open to interpretation, but also points people in a particular direction. And people, I don't know what people are going to build. I'm excited to see what it's going to be. But we've got like around a dozen different groups, communities, meetups, and things like that. We should get PhillyCocoa on the list if you guys are interested.
Yeah.
Supabase is the main sponsor that's helped us get this off the ground. They've got this great database and backend as a service tool. You don't have to use Supabase in the hackathon, but there will be points awarded for Supabase usage in some of the judging categories. But we make it an all-day event. Come in the morning, grab some breakfast, snacks. You can come in as an individual, any other work alone, or join a team. We can pair you up with a team, kind of roller coaster style. Or if you want to form a team ahead of time, that's cool too. The response that we've gotten from this has been really, really exciting, and ultimately my goal is that this is a way to not only support the meetups and the hard work that the meetup organizers in Philadelphia do, but trying to take as much work off of people's shoulders. It's hey, just bring your crew, invite your people. This is basically an event that all of us can do together. But I also want to cross-pollinate the meetups more. That I feel like I have the both the privilege and the opportunity to have to work with all these people who I know are great, and their community members are great, but they all operate in silos. And so for one day, we'll come together. People will hopefully meet people they've never met before and wouldn't meet otherwise because they're from different parts of the creative world. And my hope is that it is successful enough that we can turn this into a thing that we're doing a few times a year, maybe 3-4 times a year. So we've got a great community partners from across the city, talking to a few new sponsors to come on and help us, make tickets free for folks who I don't want to make the $10 barrier. That is more good for commitment than for covering costs. But we've got some folks that are willing to maybe give us some money to help that cover the food, drinks, all those kinds of things. I'm really stoked. I think other people are too. I think it feels like the kind of thing that Philly needs right now. Hopefully the beginning of a tradition as well.
And the URL for this again is?
It's indiehall.org/goodneighbors.
It'll be in the show notes.
Yeah.
It'll be in the show notes. All right. Well, thank you, Alex. And thank you for joining us. Till next time, good luck on your own developer journey. We will cheer for you always.
Maybe that should be what I call my Claude bot when I make one. I call him Modest
YOLO. That's really funny.